My guest this evening is truly a legend in the entertainment business. In the 1960s, he and his wife, Meara, made names for themselves as a fixture on American television, most notably for appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show 36 times. Years later, his career experienced an incredible resurgence when he was cast as Frank Costanza, George's outrageous father in the series Seinfeld. He went straight from that to the lovable yet somewhat eccentric, to say the least, character of Arthur Spooner on the CBS comedy The King of Queens. On February 7th, he's coming to the Community Theater at Mayo Center for Performing Arts in Morristown, New Jersey. It's truly an honor to have joining me on the show this evening, the one and only Jerry Stiller.
Hello.
Jerry, thanks so much for taking the time to be with me today.
My pleasure.
Now, there's about a million things I'd love to talk with you about, but let me start by asking you a little bit about your live show. Can you tell me a little bit about an evening with Jerry Stiller?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm not working right now in what we call the major industry part of it. Probably I wouldn't be working anyway because the strike is still on. I don't know if it'll be on when we're opening in Morristown. But at any rate, I always wanted to be a dream I had was to be a stand-up comedian, and I never was able to fulfill that dream. And I kept dodging the bullet, so to speak, because I always felt that was the moment when you stood by yourself and the world knew you for what you were and what you could do, and they would heap glory and joy upon you if you got them to laugh. And I did that in college one night, and I was never so wiped out by the applause that I got. And it stayed with me. They had a white spotlight on this young guy with a kind of a pork pie hat that I wore, and I wore sneakers, and I did impressions of Jimmy Durante and Peter Lorre and Maurice Chevalier, and they applauded that. I didn't know any of those people. I never practiced, but I was the campus king at the time, back at Syracuse University, and it was kind of like a thing that followed me wherever I went, and I from that point on, I really thought that would be the place I would want to go to. But it didn't go that way. It went towards theater, and then it went towards meeting my wife, Anne, who when we were at the point in our life when looking for work, and there was a thing called improvisational theater, and they needed people to replace Mike Nichols and Elaine May and Shelley Berman. They picked myself and Anne. And we went to St. Louis and learned how to take suggestions from an audience and turn them into one-act plays almost. You did it in 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. And since that time, it's become very popular. But we ourselves went on, but the whole concept of me wanting to work alone never left me. See, the blood was in me. I wanted that by myself. And so when King of Queens, and some of the other shows that have been on for so long started to fade, I started to try to put together an evening. So I started coming out, and I discovered that people really didn't think of me as stand-up, doing one-liners, but they wanted to hear a little bit about my life and how I got started, how Ann and I met, how we got on the Ed Sullivan Show, had a family, and we're being a double act took us all over the world, and I would just tell these stories, and the audience kind of liked it. So it's more like an evening of storytelling. But in the meantime, this dream of working alone didn't really surface, because in the audience would be Anne sitting there cueing me sometimes. Tell the story about the time we met in the agent's office. Tell about the time you slept over in my apartment in Greenwich Village. Well, this is all hot stuff. People like to hear that from guys my age. And so we go into little moments and moments on the daisy chain of life.
So this is kind of a cross then between a stand-up act and a one-man show.
Yeah, with the emphasis on an evening of kind of stories and also dealing with the audience at times, to ask questions about, you want to hear things about your life and stuff like that. Then just kind of trying to be entertaining. That's the thing. Get some laughs out of it, and that's what I've been doing.
And so you've been doing this then pretty much just for the past year, then?
No, this has been going on and off. When I say no, I mean I've been doing it now maybe about 3 or 4 years. I mean, I haven't done more than I haven't done it on a nightly basis in one theater. Whenever somebody calls, I've been working in the material in places like Cape Cod, the Cape Playhouse. I go there, and I go to Toms River, New Jersey, and I would go to Syracuse University, where I got my start. So wherever life takes me, I go, and people seem to respond to it when the message is sent out to the next place and the next place, and so I just keep building on this stuff while I'm doing other things in my life.
Now, you've been pretty much a constant presence on TV since the early 90s now. Are you interested in doing another television series?
Not really. but I said that in the 90s, too. I mean, in 93, I mean, I thought our career was over. It really was. There was nothing happening, and things went into the ground, and I lost our manager and everything else, and suddenly it came to life when I got a call from Tony Randall at the National Actors Theater. He wanted me to play the role of Charlie in Three Men on a Horse, he and Jack Klugman and some wonderful Broadway people. And as soon as I got that job, there was another call came from Larry David in L.A. He said, "We want you to replace the father on Seinfeld." I said, "Who's Seinfeld?" I had no idea who Seinfeld was. Everybody else knew. And I said, "I can't. I'm in a play on Broadway. We're about to open. I can't." "You can take a few days off," they said. And I refused to do it, and they passed on me. And a few months later, they came around again, and I went out there, and I played one episode on this crazy show. I played George's father, and I was asked to do some strange things like wear a bald wig and speak very quietly, because I had a wife who liked to talk loud, and her name was Estelle Harris. And I found myself in a kind of a unique position, because I was playing this role that turned out to become the thing that relaunched my life.
Oh, I mean, this was really a major resurgence for you in the 90s. I mean, Seinfeld really showed a whole, new generation just, how funny this Jerry Stiller guy really was. I mean, and really Frank Costanza is just an iconic character. I mean, did you ever dream it would become something that big?
Well, all I was dreaming, I was getting enough being called back on the show. It went on for 5 years. I was never I was what they call a recurring character. I didn't have a real. At the last few years, they said, "Well, we'll give you three episodes. We'll give you 5 episodes." And in between, I was doing Broadway and off Broadway. I just kept doing other things, because what was happening, oddly enough, was that the character on Seinfeld was getting me work in the theater, which was a little unusual, because with theater, most television actors were never really considered Broadway actors. There was a separation. But I was working in a play called "What's Wrong with This Picture" that Donald Margulis, who won a Pulitzer later, wanted me. And then there was Anne's play, After Play, and which ran a year for her, and I was playing. So I was jumping back and forth between Hollywood and there, and then with some films and other things that were happening, and just suddenly couldn't fill the bill almost. But I never stopped working.
The other thing about Seinfeld and your connection to that show that it's really become a real part of pop culture is this thing called Festivus.
Yeah.
The holiday Frank Costanza invented.
Well, I went out and there was the writing on that show that really was incredible, and Larry David was the creator with Jerry, and they had a kind of their own. I don't know. I call it comic courage to do things that most of the time they would never worry whether it was going to be nixed or axed by the network or being questioned. And somehow or other, they led this kind of charmed life. And I just, became part of it in its own wacky way. And it's really amazing when somebody will come up to you and still say, Festivus for the rest of us, They think of you in that context. I loved it. It's nothing better.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about the origins of this holiday? Because I read this somewhere, and is it true that this was actually something that somebody connected with the show actually celebrated?
Well, the father of one of the writers, his name was O'Keefe, and had somehow or other not so much celebrated. I don't know the history of this, but there was a holiday in Rome that one of the Roman emperors, when in order to keep the slaves from going nuts when this solstice season came around, decided to declare one day in which the slaves and the people who were the workers and servants could go out and just have a ball and enjoy themselves. And it was given the Roman name Festivus. And I don't know how Mr. O'Keefe's father got the idea, but whatever it is, this kid went ahead and wrote an episode in which, as people probably remember, Frank Costanza goes into the stores during the holiday season, Christmas, and he gets bumped around by people and gets into a fight with another customer over some kind of a gift, and they go to fight, they come to blows, and at that point, Frank Costanza decides that this holiday, with all its pomp and ceremony and also kind of a hypocrisy, because it's supposed to be the time of giving, is really a season when people the worst comes out in you. And he decides to celebrate another holiday named Festivus. And he creates the holiday, in which he dismantles the Christmas tree and decides an aluminum pole. That will be the symbol. And instead of exchanging wonderful good thoughts around the table, they do
the feats of strength.
Feats of strength. Yes, and mine was with George.
The airing
so
of
all the
grievances.
anger comes out of the holiday. You get it out of your system in one mighty blow, so to speak.
So have you gotten yourself a pole yet?
Well, people do kind of wonder about the pole, and I don't keep it in the house. I'll tell you, keep it in the cellar. No tinsel, no anything. Just the pole.
Now you went from Seinfeld to a series that I've got to say is my favorite show in reruns today, and that's The King of Queens. And as a cast, you guys really seem to have a great chemistry between you.
Well, you sometimes you're lucky in this business, and I found some real good things that took place between myself and Kevin and Leah and all the other people, Patton Oswalt, Victor Williams, Jerry Valentine, and Nicole Sullivan, who played the dog walker. We just magically clicked, and I don't know what it was. Again, it was the writing. All I do is go to the craft table before each week's big reading and tell her what happened to me last week. The next thing I know is it was an episode. But a lot of the writers, these young men and women, all had people in their family, uncles and aunts and grandfathers, who behaved like Frank Costanza, or I'm sorry, I'm morphing into that. Arthur Spooner. They're two different people. Though at the beginning, I must say, there was a lot of Costanza and Spooner. People were telling me that. But he became something unique, He was kind of a rogue villain who had some mental problems, and he was able to...
Well, I'll tell you, I love the character Frank Costanza, but there's something about Arthur Spooner that is just so much more complex.
Well, I had more time to develop it, and it was mostly every week, So, and every week they gave me another occupation. I mean, I'll never forget the time I became I applied for a job as the head of pediatrics at Long Island Jewish Hospital, and it didn't work out because I didn't qualify. So I came home that day and I was selling pretzels. So things of that nature were very much part, and taking over the drama department at the senior center, becoming photo there. So all of that stuff was stuff that came in, and the writing was so perfect. And we had a great producer, Michael Whitehorn, David Litt. These are guys who had spent a lot of their early days in television working on shows. David Litt was a bagel baker in Queens, turned into a producer and a writer of a sitcom, and changed his life. So we all had nice vibes that translated onto the screen.
Is there any bit of Jerry Stiller in Frank Costanza or Arthur Spooner, or vice versa?
I'm sure there is, but I don't know. I can't find them. It's a good question, because somebody told me that there was a doctor, a neurologist at Johns Hopkins who wanted to examine my brain. I never heard of anything. I got a lot of crazy things that happened in my lifetime, but he didn't follow up, obviously. So I haven't heard anything from the guy. But the characters that I'm doing is really, if I may say it, is really my dad, my father, but not the hard-edged part of it. My father was a pussycat, essentially, who underneath, if I could read him, and in these days he's been gone now for a number of years, he was all of these people. He was a composite. He was always on the raps, but he never said anything bad. He never said a bad word. He never screamed. He never did anything. But there was something about him that was so funny. The way he moved, the way he thought, the way he wouldn't say anything. He would never. For instance, my father took me to vaudeville shows when I was a kid. I was 5, 6 years old. And if a comedian was not good on stage, he'd scream out, "You're a faker! You're a faker!" And everybody was looking around, what? Because my father was really funnier than the guy on stage. Only nobody knew that, because he was a bus driver. At the time, I told you earlier, he was a cab driver, but then he became a bus driver. And bus drivers, like all the Gleasonisms that people might have, were all repressed people, taking that stuff all day long and being nice and driving a bus and making change, giving out transfers. So all the humor that I got was really some of the stuff that was kind of repressed. The way he handled it was that he would go into the bathroom and play the saxophone, you see, and because my mother couldn't take it, but he was letting out all his humor through playing a saxophone. Or at a family meeting, he'd go into the bedroom and come out wearing my cousin Beatty's fur coat, put a hat on his head, flower in his mouth, and he'd sing Carmen. See, so he was funny. And I used to see that when I was a kid. I was very embarrassed to see my father behaving in that manner. And at the same time, as I got older, I started doing him. Only I don't play the saxophone. And I still haven't put on the fur coat. But, I could see him, all his mannerisms. He'd come to my house here in New York, and we had a long vestibule kind of, and he'd put his hands behind his back and start to skate. He had no skates on, but he'd skate like ice skating. He says, "I'm Hans Brinker." And so he would just take on these wild characteristics and roles and do things like that. My mother didn't laugh too much at any of this stuff, because most of the time, the early part of the years, he was unemployed. But that's the way he handled things. If things got too rough, he'd lay down and go to sleep. That's all. I mean, there's nothing he could do about the depression. And I adapted something. I don't know what it was. So when people ask me who my idol is, who I emulate my life after, it's really my father, Willie.
I guess the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, then, does it? And your kids seem to be going in the same direction. And obviously, your son has been pretty successful in his own career. You just worked with him on a project just the end of last year, right?
Heartbreak Kid. We did that. I played his father in that movie, and I did we did a movie called Shoe Shine. It was a short subject that we did in 1987. It was about a guy who shined shoes on Staten Island Ferry. I got the part because Ben had just done House of Blue Leaves at the Lincoln Center with John Guare and the playwright Susie Kurtz and John Mahoney, and he was very. He got some very good response, and they needed somebody to play the father in this short 8-minute film done by a Columbia University student, a woman named Annette Insdorf, who was a Columbia University professor, nailed both of us for this role. I had a great time with it, doing that with them, and we had some great times.
I read
Zoolander was the name of the movie. I was trying to pull out of the hat here.
Well, I read somewhere that you said working on this latest film, The Heartbreak Kid, that it brought the two of you closer. Is that true?
I think so. For one thing, I'm always a little wary of playing with family things because people right away can say, well, what's that all about? Although in this particular movie, I had things to say which I would never say in real life, and I did say them. And it also was an opportunity again to work with your kid, and someday if the picture had any resonance, will get out there in the world. You can say, "Jesus, the two of them together, isn't that nice?" John Huston and Walter Huston. John was directing his father in movies later on. Those combinations sometimes did work, and I always felt comfortable on stage with Ben. When I say on stage, it wasn't really much of anything like we made appearances together, but I always felt comfortable working with him as I do with my daughter Amy, who I've done a lot of work with in theater, and so it's always easier for me to be on stage with my family. I enjoy it. It does bring us closer because you have to have so much trust on stage. Not everybody is so trusting on stage, and you have to develop something either in yourself that allows things to happen, call it generosity between yourself and the person you're playing with, or you have to manufacture it. You have to give it up to the other person. But here it is, both of us giving it up for each other, and that's a part of the thing we'd never have in real life. And here we are doing it on stage, where it takes the most courage, and on film. And so it does open up some respect in some ways, and with the respect comes love. It's so nice to be able to, know you're clicking with someone, whether it's your kid or anyone else, but especially with your own family.
Mm-hmm. Other than the one-man show you're doing, do you have any other projects in the works right now?
Well, like everybody else in this world, I'm writing a book. Even you say that, but it's getting some attention now, the early stages, and I'm hoping to keep going. And the other thing I left out about working with Ann, which has been probably the best thing that ever happened in my whole life, aside from all the other things that have got me in front of people these last few years, that really was the foundation of stuff. And always being together on stage and knowing when we're doing our act, wherever we played, people responding to too crazy Meshuggah.
Well, it was always, I'll tell you, it was always great to see her guest appearing at every now and then on King of Queens with you. How many years have the two of you been married now?
Well, you don't want to hear. Nobody. It's not like it's an endurance contest, but we were married in 1953. So if you got your machine there, you can figure it out. Yeah. So, and we stayed married. We've managed to keep going, and through a lot of little bumps and sideways, and a lot of success, and trying to maintain a life, have a family, and do all the things. We're a little crazy, maybe a little demanding, and maybe selfish too. We want too much, but it's managed to keep going. lucky.
What's the secret to making it work for that long? That's a good long time.
Well, first of all, Anna's one of the most forgiving people I know. She's if you need something, she doesn't hold in her own way of dealing with stuff in life. If I do something that's a little off the wall and crazy, it doesn't stick with her. It doesn't stay with her very long. That's the answer. She's forgiving, and I'm demanding. I keep, making. I'm too much. I'm too much of a taskmaster in a lot of ways, and she's too much of a kind of a fun-seeking young girl who just wants to have a little fun out of this life. And I kept saying, "Hey, listen, let's channel this. Let's do something with it. Let's make it." She says, "What are you working so hard?" And she puts up with me, and I'm lucky to have that kind of a thing. And we're both doing, if you ask the ultimate question, there's no signs and windows things, wanted actors, So when you decide to go into this business, you're looking for somebody who's going to, ride the rails with you. You got to find somebody who is a dreamer, so to speak, is willing to go along with your own dream, which is what this whole business of performing in front of people, live people, is all about. Hoping they like you, being good enough for them to not waste their time when they could be doing more productive things, and looking for something that's going to make you happy because they're happy. And we both seem to need the same things. It fills us to hear audiences respond, make us, when they laugh, we feel accepted. And that is like that in most people. But we have the opportunity of doing it on stage. We're lucky enough to do it in front of people. So that's nice.
Jerry, thank you so much for taking the time to be on today. It was really, believe me, a thrill for me, for a fan like me. It was really great to talk with you.
You betcha.
You take care, and best luck to you with the show and the book and everything.
Thank you very much.
You take care. You have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.